two students genuinely equal in ability. One is quietly expected by their teacher to succeed. The other isn't. A few months later, they're no longer equal, not because of anything they did differently, but because of something the teacher believed about them without ever saying it out loud. This isn't a motivational claim. It's the actual result of one of the most famous experiments in educational psychology, and the mechanism behind it applies far beyond classrooms, including, quite possibly, to expectations currently shaping your own life right now, in ways you've never noticed. It's called the Pygmalion effect, and once you understand exactly how it works, you'll start noticing it in your workplace, your relationships, and even in how you privately talk to yourself. The science. The original 1968 study. In 1968, psychologists Robert Rosenthal and Lenore Jacobson ran an experiment in an elementary school that's still taught in psychology courses today. At the start of the school year, students across several classrooms were given a standard IQ test. Teachers were then told that a specific subset of students, identified they were told by the test, had been flagged as growing spurters, children expected to show unusually strong intellectual growth over the coming year. Here's the critical detail. Those students weren't actually selected based on any real test result. They were chosen completely at random. The only thing different about them was that their teachers now believed, incorrectly, that these particular children had unusual potential. At the end of the school year, students were retested. The randomly selected growing spurters showed significantly greater gains in IQ scores than their classmates, despite starting out, on average, no different from anyone else in the room. The only variable that had changed was a false belief planted in the teachers' minds. Rosenthal and Jacobson concluded that teachers' expectations, even when based on, in fact, subsequently perform measurably better through a very similar mechanism of increased support, feedback, and opportunity, largely below the manager's own conscious awareness. The Pygmalion effect research also has a well-documented mirror image, sometimes called the golem effect. When someone holds lower expectations of another person, the same unconscious mechanism runs in reverse. Less time given to answer, less detailed feedback, fewer opportunities, and a general communicated lack of confidence, which can measurably suppress that person's actual performance, entirely independent of their real underlying ability. This means a low or negative expectation isn't a neutral, harmless private opinion. The research suggests it functions as an active, if unintentional, downward pressure on the exact outcome it predicts. This has serious implications well beyond classrooms. A manager who privately doubts an employee, a doctor who assumes a patient won't improve, a parent who quietly expects a child to struggle. In each case, the belief itself, communicated through dozens of small, largely unconscious behavioral signals, can genuinely help produce the very outcome it anticipated. Here's where this research becomes directly personal rather than something that only happens to you from the outside. A related line of research has documented what's sometimes called the Galatea effect, the finding that a person's expectations of themselves can produce the same self-fulfilling mechanism, independent of what anyone else believes about them. In studies examining this specifically, individuals who were led to believe they had strong potential for a task, again, regardless of any real underlying difference in ability, subsequently performed better on that task through mechanisms closely resembling the original Pygmalion research. Increased effort, increased persistence through initial difficulty, and a greater willingness to interpret early setbacks as normal rather than as proof of inadequacy. The practical implication is significant. How you privately talk to yourself about your own potential isn't simply a matter of confidence or mood. Based on this line of research, it appears to function as a genuine input into your actual future performance, through the same behavioral mechanism that shaped those elementary school students' academic results. Let's bring this together. Rosenthal and Jacobson's 1968 study demonstrated something with real, lasting implications. A completely arbitrary belief, planted in a teacher's mind about which students had potential, produced measurably real differences in those students' actual academic outcomes by the end of the year, driven by dozens of small, largely unconscious behavioral shifts in how the teachers treated them. This effect has since been replicated in workplaces, and its mirror image, the golem effect, shows the same mechanism can suppress performance just as reliably when expectations run low. Most importantly, the Galatea effect research suggests this same mechanism operates internally as well. Your own genuine belief in your potential functions as a real behavioral input, not just a feeling shaping effort, persistence, and how you interpret setbacks along the way. This doesn't mean expectation alone guarantees any outcome regardless of real ability or effort, but it does mean the belief you hold and the beliefs others quietly hold about you are not neutral, passive observations. They're active variables shown across decades of research in shaping what actually happens next. So here's the question. Whose expectations, including your own, have been quietly shaping an outcome in your life right now? And are those expectations actually serving you? Tell me in the comments. This is Turn Wiser, and I'll see you in the next one. Nothing real appear to shape how they treated these students, subtly, often without conscious awareness, in ways that measurably influenced actual academic performance. This became known as the Pygmalion effect, the phenomenon where one person's expectations of another person could become a genuine, self-fulfilling prophecy, actually shaping the outcome the expectation predicted. This finding has since been replicated well beyond classrooms, in workplaces, military training, and healthcare settings. Let's look at the actual mechanism behind how a belief translates into a real outcome, and then how this applies directly to your own life in both directions. Subsequent research into the Pygmalion effect identified several specific, largely unconscious behavioral shifts that occur when someone holds a higher expectation of another person. Teachers and managers holding higher expectations of someone tend to, without necessarily realizing it, give that person more time to answer a question before moving on, offer more detailed, constructive feedback rather than simply accepting a weak answer, provide more frequent opportunities to demonstrate ability, and communicate warmth and confidence through tone and body language that the person on the receiving end often picks up on, even if it's never stated directly. None of these behavioral shifts require the expecting person to consciously decide to treat someone differently. The research suggests they largely happen automatically, driven by the underlying belief itself. The person being expected of more effectively receives more genuine opportunities, more patience, and more implicit encouragement to succeed, not because anyone announced a plan to give them these things, but because the belief quietly reshaped ordinary, moment-to-moment behavior. This has since been replicated in workplace settings. Studies on management have found that employees whose managers were led to expect higher performance did